The story opens on the edge of the American frontier, where vast prairies and jagged mountains form the horizon and where life for settlers is fragile, unpredictable, and often short. Among the dust and ramshackle wooden buildings of a struggling settlement lives the heroine, a young white girl who has known loss all her life. Orphaned at an early age, she has no parents to guide or protect her, no siblings to share her burdens, and no relatives willing to claim her. The townsfolk remember the day her family was wiped out. Some say disease carried them off. Others whisper it was Apache raiders, but what mattered most was that she was left behind, a frightened child with no place in the world. Now grown into a young woman, she carries the shadow of her past in her posture and her wary eyes. Though she has learned to survive on her own, she is never truly accepted. The townspeople treat her as an outsider, a reminder of tragedy. They toss her scraps of work when it suits them: laundry, tending sick children, helping in kitchens, but they never invite her into their homes as family. The women mutter about her being too pretty for her own good, too vulnerable without kin, and the men watch her with a hunger she fears more than hunger itself. As whispers of Apache raids drift through the settlement, fear spreads like wildfire. Every rider seen in the distance, every plume of smoke rising from beyond the hills becomes a reason for panic. To the townsfolk, the Apache are not men but shadows, warriors on horseback who come like ghosts in the night. For the orphan girl, however, the fear is doubled. With no family to shield her, she knows if the settlement is attacked, she will be the first to be left behind. Her presence is tolerated only in times of peace. In times of danger, she is an expendable mouth. When the town council begins arranging marriages to strengthen bonds among families, she becomes the subject of another kind of gossip. Without a dowry or kin, her only worth lies in what a man might see in her youth and her ability to work. One of the older settlers, a man twice her age with a cruel reputation, takes interest. He speaks openly of making her his wife, boasting that she will have no say in the matter. The townsfolk, eager to be rid of the burden she represents, encourage the match. The girl feels the walls closing in. Marriage to such a man would mean a lifetime of submission, hardship, and likely abuse. Yet she has no one to defend her. She lies awake in the loft of the shabby barn where she sleeps, staring at the rafters and listening to the distant howl of coyotes, and wonders if this is all life will ever offer her. Freedom seems as distant as the stars above, but she clings to the fragile dream that somehow, somewhere she might belong. Her desperation grows. She begins to make quiet plans to run to steal food, perhaps take a horse, and vanish into the heathens to make quiet plans to run to steal food. Wilderness. But the frontier is as dangerous as the settlement itself. Beyond the borders lie wild animals, rivers that can sweep a person away, and the Apache, whose presence looms larger with every rumor. She knows that a girl alone would have little chance of survival. Still, the thought of living under the hand of the man who seeks to claim her feels worse than death. As tensions rise, the settlement becomes a place of fear and suspicion. Women and children huddle indoors while men polish their rifles and post lookouts. The girl watches them prepare, feeling the pulse of danger in her veins. She has grown used to fear, but this is different. This is the sense that her fate is drawing near, that the course of her life is about to shift. The townsfolk may see her as a burden, a problem to be rid of, but she carries within her a spark of defiance. She is tired of being spoken for, tired of being treated as less than human. Though she does not yet know it, destiny waits just beyond the horizon, fierce, unyielding, and bound to a warrior who will claim her not with gentle words, but with the weight of tradition, power, and fire. Part 1 closes with a storm on the horizon, both literal and figurative. The girl, standing on the edge of the settlement, watches thunderclouds gather in the distance, the air heavy with the promise of change. She does not yet know that the life she despises is about to end forever, and that soon she will be torn from everything familiar, thrust into the heart of a world she has only heard about in fearful whispers. Her fate is no longer hers to decide. It is about to be claimed. The storm that brewed on the horizon in Part 1 breaks into reality. At dawn, the sound of distant hoofbeats rattles through the ground like a drum. The townsfolk, already strung taut with fear, shout warnings. Children are swept inside cabins, shutters slam closed, rifles are clutched in trembling hands. And then they appear, Apache warriors riding fast and fierce, painted faces flashing, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. The orphan girl's heart pounds as she watches chaos erupt around her. Men fire wildly from windows and doorways, but the Apaches are too swift, too clever in their maneuvers. Within moments, the settlement is undone. Screams ring through the air, smoke begins to rise, and the girl finds herself stumbling toward the edge of the chaos, desperate to flee. But fate intervenes. A rider thunders toward her, a warrior unlike the rest. He is broad-shouldered, his skin bronzed by the sun, his black hair tied back with strips of leather. He sits astride his horse like a king, every motion commanding. His eyes dark and sharp as flintlock onto her, and in that instant she feels stripped of all defenses. Fear roots her to the spot. He dismounts with the grace of a predator and strides toward her. The girl backs away, trembling, but there is nowhere to run. He catches her by the arm, not cruelly, but with unyielding strength, and pulls her close enough to see the war paint streaking his cheek and the scar that cuts across his jaw. Evidence of battles survived. The men of the settlement shout for her to fight, to resist, but none step forward to save her. They are too busy saving themselves. The warrior looks around at them with contempt, then lifts his voice so that all his own warriors and the cowering settlers alike can hear. She is mine. The words are spoken in his tongue, but their meaning is unmistakable. He announces her claim with a voice that carries like thunder. This woman will bear my sons. She will carry my name. A hush falls over those close enough to hear. The settlers, horrified, see her not only as taken but as lost forever. To the Apaches, his declaration is law. No other warrior will lay a hand on her, for he has claimed her before all. The girl's knees threaten to give way. She shakes her head, whispering protests. No, I'm not yours. I won't. But her voice sounds weak even to her own ears. The warrior studies her, his expression unreadable. He does not soften at her fear, nor does he mock it. Instead, he lifts her as if she weighs nothing and sets her across his horse. The girl struggles, clawing at the saddle, but the warrior's hand holds her steady. He mounts behind her, his presence looming like an iron wall. Around them, his warriors laugh and shout their triumph as they wheel their horses toward the open land, leaving the burning remnants of the settlement behind. As the girl is carried away, she twists to look back. The townsfolk, those who survive, watch her go. Some avert their eyes in shame, others stare with grim satisfaction. Not one calls her name, not one runs after her. In that final moment, she understands what she had long suspected. She had never truly belonged to them. The ride into Apache territory is long and merciless. The land grows wilder with every mile, the air sharper, the silence broken only by the pounding of hooves. The girl, still shaken, dares to glance at the warrior holding her captive. His face is hard, unreadable, but there is no cruelty in his grip. He does not strike her for resisting, nor mock her tears. He simply holds her as though she is already his, as though her struggles mean nothing against the weight of his claim. Exhaustion overtakes her, and she finally goes limp, though her heart races with dread. She knows nothing of the Apache beyond the frightening tale he's told in the settlement. Will they torture her? Kill her? Or is his promise that she will bear his sons and carry his name meant to bind her to a fate worse than death? Yet beneath the fear lingers something else, confusion. For when he spoke, it was not with the tone of a man who snatches a prize in battle. It was a vow firm and final, as though spoken from a place of unshakable duty. He has chosen her for reasons she cannot fathom, and nothing in her world will ever be the same dot by the time the sun dips low and shadows lengthen. The girl sees the outline of the Apache camp ahead, tents clustered like teeth against the earth, smoke curling from fires, children playing at the edges. She realizes with a sinking heart that she is no longer a girl of the settlement. She is the claimed woman of an Apache warrior. Her life of loneliness has ended, but not in the way she dreamed. She has not been freed, nor given choice. She has been taken, and her captor has demanded not only her body but her future, her name, her very identity. As the warriors ride into camp, cheers rise up to greet them. The girl's heart clenches as all eyes turn toward her. She has entered a new world, one bound by laws and traditions she does not understand, and her fate has been sealed with a single terrifying declaration: she is mine. The Apache camp was nothing like the orphan girl imagined. All her life she had been told of savages who lived in filth and chaos. Yet as the warrior led his people home, she saw order, strength, and a kind of belonging she had never known in the settlement. The camp was alive with movement, women grinding maize, children darting between lodges, warriors tending their horses, elders watching with steady eyes. Smoke from cooking fires curled into the sky, carrying with it scents both foreign and strangely comforting. But when the warriors rode into camp, victorious and proud, every eye turned toward her. She felt their gazes like arrows sharp, unwelcoming, suspicious. Murmurs rippled through the women as they noticed her pale skin, her fair hair, her clothes torn and dirtied from the ride. Some pointed, some laughed, but most frowned. She was not one of them, and to their eyes she could never be. The warrior dismounted with fluid grace and pulled her down with him. She staggered, her legs trembling from hours in the saddle, and clung to the horse's side for balance. The warrior's hand steadied her briefly, firm and unyielding, before releasing her. Without asking, he placed her before the elders of the camp. An older woman with eyes like embers spoke quickly in their tongue, her gaze cutting into the girl. Though the words were foreign, the meaning was clear enough: disapproval. The elder turned to the warrior, gesturing sharply, as if to say, "Why her? Why bring this one?" The warrior listened but did not waver. He spoke with calm authority, his deep voice carrying over the crowd. The girl did not understand his language, but she understood the power in his tone. He had claimed her, and he was not about to be questioned. The elder shook her head but said no more. From that moment, the girl was led to his lodge. The flap was pulled open, and she was ushered inside, the air thick with smoke, leather, and the earthy scent of sage. It was simple but strong. Furs layered on the ground, weapons displayed with pride, a fire pit at the center for warmth and cooking. This was not just a dwelling, it was a warrior's home. She stood frozen, her mind racing. She was in the heart of an enemy camp, surrounded by people who did not want her, belonging to a man who had claimed her with a single declaration. She wondered if she would survive the night, if she would wake to find herself bound or worse. Yet the warrior said nothing. He gave her food, a piece of roasted venison, and gestured for her to eat. Her pride screamed to refuse, but hunger gnawed at her, and her trembling hands betrayed her as she took it. The warrior watched her quietly, his gaze steady but not unkind. When she finished, he spoke a few words in his language, slow, as if hoping she might understand. She shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. The gulf between them was wide, and she felt small within it. The days that followed were harder still. The Apache women avoided her or treated her with open disdain. They whispered when she passed, some spitting at her feet, others pulling there. Children closer as though she carried a disease. She tried to help, offering to gather water or wood, but her clumsy efforts were met with laughter or irritation. To them, she was useless, a burden, and most of all, an outsider, yet the warrior. Never let harm come to her. When a group of younger warriors mocked her one evening, he stepped forward, his presence alone silencing them. When one of the women hissed insults at her, he spoke sharply, cutting the woman off. The girl realized with a strange mix of fear and relief that his claim was more than words. He meant it. She was under his protection, and none would dare defy him. But protection did not mean tenderness. His demeanor was commanding, his gaze unrelenting. He expected her to adjust, to learn, to stand beside him without complaint. At night, she lay awake on a fur near the fire, aware of him nearby, her body tense with dread of what might come. Yet he did not touch her, not yet. His demand hung in the air like a storm cloud. Bear my sons. Carry my name. She knew it was only a matter of time before he would press that claim. Despite her fear, curiosity began to take root. She watched the Apache children laugh and play, their mothers guiding them with gentle firmness. She saw warriors return with game, sharing it among the people so no one went hungry. She observed rituals at night, songs rising into the stars, prayers to spirits she had never heard of. The longer she stayed, the more she realized the stories she had grown up hearing, stories of savages, were not truth, but fear wrapped in lies. Still, none of it eased her heart. She was trapped between two worlds, unwanted in the one she left behind, unaccepted in the one she was forced into. And yet, tethered to the warrior who had claimed her, she began to sense her future would not be decided by flight or by fear. It would be decided by him and by the choice she would one day have to make. The days passed with a strange rhythm. The orphan girl could neither escape nor fully accept. She learned the sounds of the camp, the laughter of children at play, the pounding rhythm of drums in the evening, the low murmur of voices carried by smoke-filled air. Yet for all that surrounded her, she felt isolated, a single pale face adrift in a sea of bronze. And always there was him, the warrior, her captor, her protector, her judge. His presence was inescapable. When he walked through the camp, people stepped aside. When he spoke, they listened. He carried authority as naturally as he carried his weapons, and though he seldom raised his voice, the weight of his words was like iron. She was bound to him, not by ropes or chains, but by his claim and by the laws of his people. At first, he gave her space, perhaps out of patience, perhaps out of strategy. But soon, his demand returned, spoken not as a suggestion but as a destiny already chosen. One evening, as the fire in his lodge burned low, he turned to her and said, slowly and firmly, so that even in her limited understanding she could grasp the meaning, "You will bear my sons. You will carry my name." The word struck her like a blade. Fear surged hot in her chest, and she shook her head violently, whispering, "No, I can't, I won't." Her voice broke on the last word. She expected anger, perhaps violence, but the warrior did not strike. Instead, he regarded her with that piercing, unreadable stare, as if her defiance were nothing more than the cry of a trapped bird. But he did not relent. Each day, in different ways, he reminded her of his claim. When the women sneered at her, he spoke so they could hear, "She is mine." When she faltered at her chores, he guided her hand, then repeated the vow, his tone leaving no doubt that her future lay with him. It was not cruelty that drove him, but an unyielding certainty, as though the spirits themselves had placed her in his path and he would not dishonor their will. The girl's fear soon turned to anger. She had endured a lifetime of being unwanted, unseen, and dismissed by those in the settlement. And now here, when she finally had someone's attention, it came not as kindness but as a command. One night when he repeated his vow, she snapped. "I am not yours," she cried, her voice trembling yet fierce. "You cannot decide my life, my body, my future. I would rather die than—" Her words faltered, but the fire in her eyes did not. The warrior listened, silent, unmoving. Then, slowly, he rose to his full height. His shadow loomed across the lodge walls, and for a heartbeat she thought he might strike her. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, close enough that her defiance caught in her throat. His voice was low, but steady. "You are mine." The words were not shouted, but their power silenced her all the same. They were not spoken with arrogance, but with a conviction that shook her to her core. It was not a threat, it was a truth, at least to him. Yet in the days that followed, she began to glimpse another side of him. When she nearly stumbled into a rattlesnake near the riverbank, it was his knife that struck swift and sure, killing it before it struck her. When a rival warrior, emboldened by her outsider status, muttered that she should be cast out, it was her Apache captor who stood tall, hand on his weapon, daring any man to defy his claim. And when a sudden storm broke, lightning splitting the sky, he pulled her beneath shelter, shielding her with his own body as rain hammered the earth. These moments unsettled her more than his demands. For in them, she saw not only a warrior who claimed her as property, but a man bound by an unshakable sense of honor, one who protected what was his with the same ferocity he would his people. Confusion warred within her. Fear still held her tightly, fear of his strength, of his authority, of the inevitability of his claim. But another feeling, quieter and more dangerous, began to stir. She felt it in the way her breath quickened when his gaze lingered too long, in the strange comfort that settled over her when she realized he would never let harm befall her. He was both her captor and her shield. The paradox of it gnawed at her, kept her awake at night, staring into the fire's dying embers. She told herself she hated him, that she would never surrender. Yet deep inside, she knew a truth she could not yet admit. Her fate was already entangled with his as tightly as the knots that bound their world together. The girl stands on the threshold of transformation. She is still defiant, still clinging to her resistance, but the warrior's presence has begun to shift something within her. His demand remains, unyielding as the mountains. "Bear my sons. Carry my name." But now, for the first time, she wonders if beneath that demand lies more than dominance, perhaps destiny itself. The days stretched into weeks, and the orphan girl found herself caught between two worlds, the one she had left behind and the one she had been thrust into. Neither felt like home, yet both pulled at her with invisible threads. In the Apache camp, she learned to survive in ways she had never known. The women still eyed her with suspicion, whispering sharp words she could not understand but felt all the same. They did not trust her hands to grind maize properly, nor her eyes to choose the right herbs for medicine. But she persisted, stubbornly determined to prove she was not useless. Slowly, she found small tasks she could complete, fetching water from the river, helping to gather berries, watching over children when their mothers were occupied. To her surprise, the children were the first to accept her. They followed her curiously, tugging at her hair and laughing at her attempts to mimic Apache words. Their laughter, light and unburdened, reminded her of a time long before loss and fear had shaped her life. With them, she felt a flicker of belonging, yet the adults were not so easily swayed. Every glance reminded her she was an outsider. And when the warrior's gaze lingered on her in public, when he repeated his claim, "She is mine," other women stiffened. To them, her presence was not just foreign, but threatening. She was a symbol of intrusion into their world. At night, alone by the fire in his lodge, she wrestled with her feelings. Her fear of him had not vanished, but it had grown complicated. He demanded her obedience, her body, her future. And yet, he never forced what she would not give. His patience puzzled her. His eyes, dark as the night sky, did not waver when he looked at her, but they were not cruel. There was something else there, something she could not name. One evening, as twilight bled across the sky, the girl overheard him speaking with another warrior. She could not understand every word, but she caught fragments. Her name, his name. Sons, blood, the future. His voice carried weight, as though he were speaking of more than just possession. She realized then that his demand that she bear his sons and carry his name was not only about desire, it was about legacy. He had chosen her to continue his line, to bind her life to his people's survival. The thought unsettled her. She had never been wanted before, not truly. In the settlement, she had been a burden, a problem to be solved, a girl passed from pity to disdain. Now she was wanted, but in a way that frightened her as much as it tempted her. To belong to him would mean safety, protection, a place among his people. But it would also mean surrendering her past, abandoning any dream of returning to the world of her birth. Her conflict deepened when a chance to escape arose. One morning, sent with 2 women to fetch water, she noticed a narrow path leading out of the canyon where the camp lay hidden. The women, busy gossiping, paid her no mind. Her heart leapt. If she slipped away now, she might make it back to the settlement, or at least away from this place. Her feet even shifted toward the path, but she froze. The memory of the settlement cut through her. She remembered the hard stares, the whispered insults, the cruel hand of the man who had intended to make her his wife. She remembered how, when the Apaches had taken her, not one soul had tried to stop them. If she returned, would anyone truly welcome her? Or would she find herself in chains? Of a different kind? She stayed, though her heart thundered with the knowledge that she had chosen it. That night, when she returned to the lodge, the warrior studied her face as if he knew. He said nothing, but his eyes lingered, sharp and searching, as though he could see the war raging inside her. Days later, the warrior began to open pieces of himself to her. Sitting by the fire, he showed her scars-long, jagged lines across his arm and chest. He spoke, his voice low, telling stories she only partly understood. Through gestures and fragments of words, she learned of battles fought against soldiers, of loved ones lost, of a brother killed before his eyes. His strength was undeniable, but in those moments, she glimpsed the man beneath the warrior, a man shaped by grief, duty, and survival. Her heart softened in ways that frightened her more than his strength ever had. She found herself stealing glances at him when he did not look, listening for his footsteps, feeling oddly secure when he was near. This confused her deeply. He was her captor, yet he was also her protector. He demanded her future, yet he had given her more respect than anyone in the settlement ever had. The girl staring into the flames, her mind torn in two. She could not deny the fire that sparked between them, nor the truth that her heart was beginning to recognize what her mind still resisted. She belonged nowhere yet with him. She might. The girl's fragile place within the Apache camp was tested sooner than she imagined. The calm rhythm of days gathering food, tending fires, watching children was shattered one dawn when the sound of shouting ripped her from sleep. The sharp cry of a horn echoed through the canyon, followed by the unmistakable thunder of hooves. She stumbled from the lodge, her heart hammering. All around her, warriors rushed to arm themselves. Women pulled children into the safety of lodges, while the elders barked urgent instructions. The camp, usually filled with the hum of daily life, bristled with the tension of war. The warrior, her captor, her protector, appeared at her side, already armed with bow, quiver, and knife. His face was painted, his eyes hard as steel. He barked words she could not understand, gesturing sharply for her to return inside. But she resisted, clutching at his arm. "What is it? What's happening?" He did not answer, but the truth soon revealed itself. From the ridge above, soldiers descended, men in uniforms, rifles gleaming, their formation tight and purposeful. The girl recognized them instantly. U.S. cavalry. Once, their sight would have filled her with relief. But now, seeing them approach, her chest tightened not with hope but with dread. Shots cracked through the air. Warriors leapt to defend their camp, arrows flying, war cries rising like thunder. The girl crouched low, trembling. She had dreamed of soldiers rescuing her, but the truth unfolded before her eyes. They were not here to save her. They were here to destroy the people who had given her shelter. However, unwillingly dot as the battle raged, smoke and dust choked the air. Children cried, women screamed, and the clash of steel and gunfire filled her ears. She saw a soldier seize a young Apache boy who had wandered too far from safety. Without thinking, she rushed forward, grabbing a stick from the ground and striking the soldier across the arm. He spun on her, eyes narrowing as he recognized her pale skin. "You white girl," he shouted. "Come with us. We'll take you back." The words froze her. For months she had longed to hear them, yet the boy's terrified cries pierced her heart. She shoved the soldier with all her strength, yelling for the child to run. The boy darted back toward the lodges, and in the chaos, the soldier raised his rifle. Before he could fire, the Apache warrior was there. His knife flashed, swift and sure, and the soldier fell. The warrior pulled her against him, his chest heaving. With battle rage, his eyes burning as he looked at her. She expected fury for disobeying his command to stay hidden, but instead, she saw something else. Respect, pride. The battle raged on. The Apaches fought with ferocity, using the land as their weapon, striking from shadows, melting into cover. The cavalry, unprepared for the canyon's traps, faltered. At last, with heavy losses, the soldiers retreated, their bugle sounding the call to withdraw. Dust rose as they fled, leaving behind the fallen. Silence followed, broken only by the sobs of the wounded and the crackle of fire. The camp bore scars of the fight lodges torn, blood staining the earth, lives extinguished. Yet it still stood. The girl, shaking and exhausted, realized she was no longer seen as a helpless outsider. The women who once spat at her now watched her with new eyes. They had seen her strike a soldier, protect a child, stand in the line of danger. For the first time, they murmured not with scorn, but with acknowledgment. She had defended the people she once feared. That night, the camp gathered around the fire to honor their dead and celebrate survival. Songs rose into the sky, strong and defiant. The warrior sat beside her, silent, his arm brushing hers. He did not repeat his demand aloud, but his glance said enough. She was no longer just his captive. She had chosen, in that moment of danger, to stand with them. The girl lay awake long after the fire died down, her thoughts tangled. The soldiers had offered her escape, a return to the life she had once known. Yet when the moment came, she had turned away from them. She had chosen to protect a child who was not hers, to risk herself for a people who had not yet accepted her. Why? The answer pulsed through her, though she dared not speak it, because this place, this people, and this warrior had become more to her than the settlement ever had. Her heart was no longer tethered to the past. It was being pulled, inexorably, into this new life. The girl understands that she has passed a threshold. She is no longer just the orphaned white girl claimed by an Apache warrior. She is something more, an outsider forging her place among them, her fate no longer tied to the world she left behind. The night after the battle, the camp settled into uneasy quiet. Fires glowed low, and the songs of mourning and triumph had faded to silence. The girl sat alone outside the warrior's lodge, staring at the stars above the canyon rim. Her body ached from fear and exhaustion, but it was her heart that carried the heaviest weight. The soldier's offer still echoed in her ears. "Come with us. We'll take you back." She had dreamed of those words for so long. Yet when faced with them, she had not gone. Instead, she had struck a soldier to save a child, and in doing so, chosen a side. That choice haunted her now. Why had she done it? Why had she risked herself for people who were not hers, who had not welcomed her, who had claimed her without asking? She looked toward the warrior's lodge, where he moved inside, tending to his weapons. His silhouette against the firelight was strong, proud, unshaken. He had fought like a storm, defending not only his people but her. She remembered the way his arm had pulled her close in the chaos, the fierce pride in his eyes when she had fought. Beside them, the truth rose within her like fire. She had not stayed out of fear or obligation. She had stayed because of him. The realization terrified her. For weeks she had resisted, clinging to the belief that she was a prisoner, that she owed him nothing. Yet her heart betrayed her. When she thought of safety, she thought of his shadow between her and danger. When she thought of strength, she thought of his voice, firm and unwavering. And when she thought of belonging, something she had never truly known, she thought of the way his eyes lingered on her, not with mockery or disdain, but with certainty, as though she had always been meant to stand beside him. That night, he emerged from the lodge and came to stand before her. His presence was a force all its own, pulling her from her thoughts. He studied her face for a long moment before speaking in slow, deliberate words she could understand. "You did not run." She swallowed hard, lowering her eyes. I couldn't." "You chose us," he said. It was not a question that her throat tightened. She lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes, and for once she did not look away. "I chose the child. He was in danger. I couldn't let him be hurt." The warrior's lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close. "The child is us. When you protect him, you protect us. When you fight with us, you are one of us." His words struck deep. For so long she had lived on the edges of belonging, too much of a burden for the settlement, too strange for the Apache camp. And now here he was, telling her she was part of them. Then, as he always did, he repeated his vow. His voice was quiet but unyielding, his gaze burning into her. "You will bear my sons. You will carry my name." The girl's breath caught. She had resisted those words so many times, spitting back defiance, clinging to her freedom. But this time was different. This time her heart did not recoil. Instead, it fluttered with a strange, dangerous warmth. She rose slowly to her feet, standing before him, her chin trembling but held high. "You say those words as if I have no choice," she whispered. "You have a choice," he replied, surprising her. "But your heart already knows." His words broke something inside her. She wanted to argue, to deny it, but she could not. Her heart did know. It had known when she turned from the soldiers, when she risked herself for the Apache boy, when she felt relief in his shadow during the battle. Tears stung her eyes, not of fear but of release. "I don't understand it," she said softly. "I should hate you. I should hate this place. But I don't." The warrior stepped closer, his hand lifting slowly to touch her cheek. It was the first time he had touched her without force, without claim, only with reverence. The warmth of his palm against her skin sent shivers through her. "You do not hate," he said. "You belong." In that moment, She let go of the last threads of resistance. She leaned into his touch, her heart pounding. She was no longer the orphan girl desperate to escape, no longer the captive torn between two worlds. She was a woman making a choice, not because she was forced, but because her heart demanded it. That night, when she stepped into his lodge beside him, it was not as a prisoner. It was as his chosen. The girl surrenders not in fear, but in love. The warrior's demand, bear my sons. Carry my name no longer feels like chains, but like a promise. What began as force has become destiny, and what began as resistance has blossomed into acceptance of her heart's true choice. Morning light spilled across the canyon, painting the red cliffs with fire. The girl, no longer just a frightened orphan, emerged from the warrior's lodge with her head held high. Something inside her had shifted. The night before, she had entered his shelter as a captive trembling with doubt. Now she stepped into the dawn as a woman who had chosen. The Apache people watched her carefully. For weeks, they had judged her as an outsider, some with suspicion, others with quiet curiosity. But today, their eyes carried something different: respect. The memory of her standing in the midst of battle, striking down a soldier to protect one of their own, had spread through the camp like fire on dry grass. She was no longer the helpless white girl they had tolerated. She had proven herself with courage, with loyalty. The warrior stood beside her, tall and unshaken, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, not to claim her as property, but to present her as something far greater. His voice rose strong and steady, addressing his people. She fought with us. She protected our children. She chose to stay when others offered escape. She is no longer alone. She is mine. She will carry my name. The crowd murmured in agreement. For the first time, she did not flinch at his words. Instead, warmth bloomed in her chest. His name was no longer a burden, no longer chains upon her freedom. It was shelter, identity, belonging, the thing she had longed for since she was a child left to fend for herself. That evening, the Apache women led her into the circle of firelight. They adorned her hair with feathers and beads, dressing her in woven cloth dyed with the earth's deep hues. They painted her cheeks with symbols of union and strength. For the first time, she did not resist their hands or their customs. She welcomed them. The ceremony began with chants that echoed into the darkening sky. The drumbeat pulsed like the rhythm of a heart, binding her spirit to theirs. When the warrior stepped forward, his eyes never left hers. He spoke words in his language, words she could not yet fully understand, but she heard the meaning in the certainty of his tone. He was binding himself to her not through demand, but through promise. When it was her turn, she hesitated only briefly. The orphan girl inside her, the one who had always been unwanted, whispered doubts. But the woman she had become silenced that voice. She looked into his eyes and said clearly, though her voice trembled, "I am yours. I carry your name." The camp erupted in approval. For the first time, she was embraced not as a captive, not as a stranger, but as one of them. The children who once mocked her tugged at her hands, eager for her attention. The women who had whispered behind her back now smiled with pride. Even the elders, stern and unyielding, nodded their approval. That night, when the fires died down, and the people returned to their lodges, she remained with him under the stars. The air was cool, the silence heavy with unspoken truths. She turned to him, searching his face. "Why me?" she asked softly. "From the beginning, why did you choose me?" He studied her for a long moment before answering. "Because I saw strength in your eyes. Even when you feared, you did not break. A woman like that bears strong sons. A woman like that carries a name with honor." Tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow, but of something she had never truly known: recognition. He had seen her not as a burden, not as an orphan, but as someone worthy of standing at his side in his arms that night, she found peace. Not the fragile peace of silence, but the deep, enduring peace of belonging. She was no longer an orphan, wandering between worlds. She was no longer a girl caught between fear and defiance. She was a woman of choice, of courage, of love, seasons past. She learned their language more fully, their songs, their traditions. She carried water with the women, tended the fires, laughed with the children. When she felt new life stirring within her, she did not feel dread. She felt pride. She was carrying not only his sons, but his legacy. Their legacy. When she looked back on her journey, the lonely days in the settlement, the terror of her capture, the battles between heart and will, she realized everything had led her here. To this warrior, to this people, to this new name, and so the orphaned white girl, once nameless and unwanted, bore proudly the name of an Apache warrior. She bore his sons, not as a prisoner bound by force, but as a woman who had chosen her place, her people, and her love. Her story was no longer one of captivity. It was one of transformation. Her arc is complete. She has gone from frightened, unwanted orphan to a woman who chooses her destiny, embracing the warrior's vow not as demand but as devotion. She carries his name, his sons, and most importantly, a newfound sense of identity and belonging she never believed possible.